Hey guys, it's Julian here. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make some selected style future house drops, kind of like New Aspect or True Concept or like any of those kind of artists. Before I start this video, I want to let everyone know this project file as well as the samples and all the presets and all the MIDI are in the description in my Bandcamp. You can get them for just $5. If you want like a kit to just get started with this style and have like a collection of sounds that you could use to try a few tracks and see what you can come up with, I think this will be a really, really good thing for you and you should check it out. Anyway, I'm going to dive in now. So pretty much this is the loop you heard in the intro. It's pretty simple. It's just a few layers of synths and then some effects and some drums. Pretty simple. So I'm going to start with the synths. So the synths on their own sound like this. And it is 5 layers. So it sounds like this. And so what this is made up of is it's a few like lead layers and then some basses. Very simple. So the first thing I have is these chords, or are these chords. They're pretty simple. As far as the MIDI goes, I've just sort of drawn in these, like, I guess you would call them dyads. They're just 2-note chords, excuse me. And what they are is they're just the first, like the root note and then the third. But what I've done is I've pitched the thirds up an octave so you get that, like, that real split up kind of sound that I always talk about if you watch my videos. And it just gives like a little bit more definition to it because you get those nice kind of like higher range sounds out of this preset, which really sound nice and pretty like warm and just like good. And then this like lower note, so you're kind of getting the best of both. And yeah, it's really not too crazy. It's just a matter of like doing these kind of bouncy patterns, like using a lot of 16th notes. And then I have a swing on there, but I mean that's pretty simple. I use the swing because there's like multiple things in here that needed to be swung. Like for example, the hi-hats, and then all these like different synth layers. And so I wanted to use a swing so they would all be on the same groove instead of if I went in and like did my own swing by like moving that back and stuff, it could potentially not all be the same across all tracks and it wouldn't be as tight sounding. So that's pretty much it for the MIDI. I'll show you the effects and the synth and stuff. The synth sound for this is pretty simple, actually. It's just this little thing I made in Serum. Basically, it's a saw wave, an octave up, and then a sine wave on basic shapes, but I put bend plus on it. This is just a bend plus or minus, so I put it down. But if you see, if I turn that off, if I turn that off, it is a sine wave. But what happens is when you put the bend minus, it turns it into this waveform, which sounds like a saw wave, but I really like it for these kind of sounds where you have a filter envelope on it because it just sounds a little bit cleaner sounding. Like it's just a little bit nicer to me. And then I also have a saw wave on top of that, an octave up, like I said. Next thing is I have this low pass filter, which just has envelope 1 on it, doing this little kind of pluck sound. And this envelope 1 is also, if you know, also routed to the volume, so it's the same envelope on both of them. It makes the sound a little bit tighter, as opposed to if I use this one for the volume and then this sound for the filter, it just wouldn't be as like together, I guess. The only other thing I did in the synth here was I just put on a little bit of reverb, just to give it some space. It was just a little too dry without. Outside of the synth, what I did was I put on this low pass filter. No, I put on this high pass filter that I made with EQ8. And that's just cutting out a lot of low end because there's a lot of layers here, so you really have to make sure each one is very focused on like what it's meant to do. And so yeah, that was that. Next thing is this reverb, and I want to talk about this. This is a pretty popular effect. So if you see here, I have this reverb, and it's not on for most of the time, but then it just comes on at these little parts. And I'll show you what that sounds like. So this is when it's not on. And then that's when it's on. You hear what it's doing? That's how you do those kind of like reverb sweeps that they have in all their tracks. Like a lot of these selected style tracks have these. new aspect does this in like every song, which I think is a really cool effect. I really like it. But that's how you do it. What you do is you get a reverb with like a pretty long decay time. I didn't touch any other settings on here, just the decay time. And then you automate the dry wet to come on at like a certain time like this and just go up and then quickly change. Now, you don't want to just do it up and then have it be like a straight line like this, because it'll be kind of you'll hear like a click. I'll show you. You can hear like a little click at the end of that. So you want to do a little like sort of like ramp down like that. But yeah, another popular way people use this, and I didn't do it in this track because I have these little vocal reverses, but another like popular way people will do this is they'll do like this. So they'll have like a whole 2-bar little loop, and then at the end of 2 bars there will be no notes for this whole count, the 4 here. And so you can like do the reverb automation there, so it'll go like you can do that as well. You have to tweak it a little bit. Obviously that wasn't as pronounced as this one is, but you know, it's workable. But I want to show you how to do that effect, because that's very, very important for this style. And yeah, it's really simple. Like, there's not much more to say about it other than that. And then after that, I just put on this compressor and sidechaining it to the kick. Pretty straightforward. So the next 2 layers are these 2 leads, which I will sort of talk about at the same time, because they're just one-shots, and there's not anything to really talk about with the synth. So this is like another important thing for this sound, is these kind of sounds. Is these like quick, plucky, sort of like mallet-y kind of sounds, like this one, for example. And really the only way you can do these is by using one-shots, because these aren't, like, if you use a live, say you use like a live marimba, for example, or you use like an Omnisphere preset of a marimba. I'll load up Omnisphere really quick. The reason why you can't just do that is because what's going to happen is if you have like one of these live sort of like bell kind of mallet type of sounding presets, a lot of times what happens is they don't play the same sample a lot of times. So you'll get a lot of variance dynamically, which isn't good for this particular sound. You want these to just be the same through the whole track. Alright, this is taking a very long time to load. But yeah, like you really want these to be the same thing. I'll show you what I was talking about with like Omnisphere, or Contact is like this as well. It's just something that happens with like sort of recreations, or not recreations, but these multi-sampled like mallet kind of library sounds. So you can hear how that's just, it keeps changing and it's never the same sample twice. You don't want that. It just wouldn't sound good. So you got to use a one-shot to do these kind of mallet sounds, and like these as well. And then as far as processing goes on both of those, it's actually the same on both. Well, save for that chorus. But it's just that reverb that's doing the sweeps that I explained, and then another sidechain compressor. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Anyway, like I was saying, yeah, so it's just the reverb sweep thing and then the compressor that's sidechaining it to the kick. Really nothing too crazy there. I did put a chorus on the second lead just because I wanted to give it a little bit more stereo width. Both of these layers were kind of mono sounding. It just didn't sound that good in the whole mix. So after that I had the bass. So the bass is 2 layers. It's this sub and then this mid bass. So the sub, it's pretty simple. It's just a Serum preset that I made. It's a sine wave. The FM from B is on, but it's not being used. And then what I'm doing is it's distorting like very heavily. Well, not super heavily. But then I have this low pass filter on here after the distortion that is doing a little bit of it's got like an envelope on it. And it's the same thing as I was saying with the chords. It's the same envelopes on the volume, so it's like one uniform sound. And that's just doing like a little pluck. Really nothing too crazy there. And then I just have that sidechain to the kick. I don't really do too much to my subs. Excuse me. I really like to just let them breathe and be what they are, which is just like a thick sub bass. The next thing I want to talk about is this mid bass. And this is a little bit more complex, but nothing really too crazy. Again, this preset, you can get it in the description, so if you want it, you can just tear it apart there. So So what it is it's two sine waves. Oh, this is kind of messy. It's two sine waves. One is up 2 octaves and 7 semitones, and then one is just playing the root. And then I have FM on the one that's up 2 octaves and 7 semitones, but then I also have that one playing. Usually when you do FM basses, you would turn the level down of the one that's doing the FM, but that didn't really sound too good here. So bringing this one up is what gave it that last extra little bit of kind of like future house-ness, I guess. And nothing really else on the oscillator tab. I do have a little bit of stuff going on in the effects. So what I have in the effects, I'll show you without the effects and I'll just put them on. So the sound is kind of there, but it's not really all the way. So what I did was a similar technique to the sub. I distorted this thing to like very extreme levels. And then I put this chorus on. And then I put a filter on which had this envelope on it. And that's how you get the pluck sound. So this is a cool technique because you can create some sort of waveforms that you couldn't just create like with oscillators, or that you wouldn't come to as easily with oscillators. Of course, you could always, if you wanted to just sit out and draw the harmonics of this sound, of course you could do that. But you're gonna come up with like a little bit more interesting ideas just from messing around if you do it this way, because this distortion is adding harmonics on top of this sound, and it's making it like really extreme. And then when you put the filter on it, it's as if that's just the sound coming from your oscillators, if that makes any sense, and you're just making a regular pluck. Now, I like this chorus as well. It's something I hear a lot in these kind of bass sounds. And it just gives it a little bit of nice stereo width as well. So after that, I just did the same thing, the reverb sweep, and then I did a high pass filter because I didn't want the low end since I had a sub, and then I sidechained it to the kick. And that's pretty straightforward. Like these layers, it's just a matter of layering and like choosing layers that aren't that are serving things that aren't already in the track, if that makes any sense. They're all doing something different. I don't just have layers and layers of the same thing. So next thing I want to talk about is the effects, which are pretty important to this style. Wow, my grammar is terrible today. So all the effects that I have are like this. Here, I'll show you. I have this, I have these reverses, and then I obviously have a crash. So crash is pretty straightforward, just some crash samples. I'll also talk about, I have some fills in here as well. You know, those go with kind of the drums, but they're effects, I guess. They're just in there at the end of every 8 bars. Pretty straightforward, just sort of signifies a new part is coming. So these trumpet stabs that I have, I hear these kind of things a lot in tracks. What they'll do is you cut out all the like main stuff on this first count here, the 1 from there to there, and have just the kick and the trumpet stab, and then everything comes in on the next beat. And it sounds pretty good. Yeah, really not too much else to say about that other than just that's how you do it, I guess. I just have a reverb on that, which I set like this, a side chain, and then I have it high pass. Really nothing too crazy. It's really just about finding the little stab. And there's one in this sample pack if you want to go and get it. Alright, anyway. So the next thing I have is these little reverses. It's 2 layers. It's this thing, which I made in Serum. And the way I made this was the same way that I did these little reverb sweeps. I had this like sine wave preset in Serum. Let me show you without any of this stuff. So it was just like a sine wave playing the chords, and then I did one of these little reverb sweeps at the end of the bar, and I bounced it down. And you don't really have to do these kind of things, but it was just another extra layer to accentuate the vocal reverses, which you've heard, and I will show you in a second. As far as processing on this thing, all I did, it's really not that crazy. I just put on an erosion. I just liked having that little bit of like, it almost sounded like a bell, like a reverse bell, because it's got those higher harmonics on it. After that, I put on this a bit warmer saturator, nothing too crazy, just to sort of beef it up a little bit. And then I high passed it and sidechained it. For the vocal reverses, so those sound like this. I'm trying to skip around. So these really aren't too crazy. It's just a matter of sort of finding them, really. It's like you just need to like find some good samples like this. And you can shop them from a lot of places. I'm not going to go into it too much now, but you just want to find little like vocal sounds and then you reverse them. And putting a bunch of reverb on them and then sidechaining them and then, yeah, putting that over top of all these midis, it just adds a little extra element that sounds a lot better. If I play it with and then I play it without, you're going to see that it's like very empty in that part. I mean, it would still be kind of cool, but this definitely adds like a whole extra element, so it's important. So, yeah, there's really not too much to that, though. It's just reverb, sidechaining it, and then a high pass. So the drums I'll talk about now. So the drums are actually pretty simple. It's just really these main layers. So first thing I have is the kick. And I do want to talk a little bit about kicks. So pretty straightforward there. So the kind of kicks that you want to find are like these kind of kicks, like the very tight, punchy, kind of like short, almost like progressive house kicks, like the ones people were using in like those big progressive house tracks like for the past couple of years. And you just want to make sure it's very tight and clean and it's the loudest thing in the mix. Which obviously you can see was what I was going for here. Really not too much to say about that. I didn't even put any effects on it. I just leveled it out. And yeah, the claps. Okay, so I'll show you the claps. So the claps sound like this. It's 2 layers. It's this one and then this one. Oh, whoops. Excuse me. This layer and then this layer. So I have 2 layers because I like this one, how it's like a little bit loose, but it's still pretty tight. And then I like how this one, it was just like a little extra crack on top of that. Like just sort of a little bit of kind of like to add to it, I guess. And yeah, so that's really that. Not too much to say. I just have this one. I pulled it back a little bit because there's that little thing going into it. Yeah, it just sounds good. Not really too much to say. I have the hi-hats here. So I made my own little hi-hat loop. You know, like a lot of times you can get hi-hat loops from samples packs. Well, I wanted to make one. So what I did was I put a drum rack in here. And I put all these different hi-hats in it. And that rim shot. And then I just sort of programmed them. And it's nice because you have them all on one track and it's just kind of easy to work with because it's all in MIDI. And I don't really use drum racks, but I do like using drum racks for this. When you have a lot of sounds that are in the same sort of like space, with like, you know, sort of mixing and all that, it's very useful for that. And then I just have the fills, pretty straightforward. I just put together these fills out of like a few different ones. I mean, really not too much to say. They just sort of go at the end of the bars, or at the end of every 8 bars. I mean, that's pretty much it though, guys. It's really just about doing like a lot of, like I was saying, like the layers, the tight drums, and then just adding little extra effects on top of it to give it a little bit more flavor. And you can really do this pretty quickly if you follow all these rules. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the support and all the love. You can get this sample pack and project file and MIDI and presets in the description for just $5. Make sure to like this video, comment, subscribe, maybe share this video, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow for another video.